Welcome to another video from ExplainingComputers.com. This time we're going to look at a reconditioned small form factor computer. Over the past decade, many companies have switched from traditional tower PCs to small form factor models. And so, as they upgrade their systems, there's now a lot of renewed small form factor hardware on the market at a very good price. Specifically, in this video, we're going to take a look at an i5 HP EliteDesk 800 G2, which is currently hiding down here in this rather large box. This is what I received when I ordered a small form factor computer. So, let's go and take a closer look. Right, the EliteDesk 800 G2 in this box was launched in 2015 and was available with a variety of CPUs, although the one in here has got an i5 6500T. As the machines were very widely leased as well as sold, lots of reconditioned units are now available, with prices starting from around $100, pounds or euros, depending on the processor, RAM and drive specification. Certainly there are lots of listings on eBay and Amazon, and I've pulled some of these together in the Explaining Computers storefront, from which I do earn a commission. This particular computer cost me £135 including delivery, and alongside its i5 CPU has got 8GB of RAM, a 512GB SSD, and it also comes with a keyboard and a mouse, which probably explains the size of this box. Anyway, let's now get inside. Let's grab Stanley my knife, and this is a large unboxing. Oh yes, we can get in there, I hope. Have we got in? Sort of have, yes. This is going to be a... Oh yes, something's happened. Oh, it's largely empty inside, that's a surprise. And oh, we've got lots of bubble wrap, we can pop that later. And that's definitely a computer. I thought it'd be in a box inside here, it isn't. That's a power supply, and whoa, that's the keyboard. Dearie me, where can I put all that? Down there on the floor. Let's take a look. What have we got? We've got, that's most definitely a keyboard. I was going to say HP keyboard, it isn't. It's a Cherry keyboard. That's rather good. Got the keyboard there like that. Something else in here, which is, that is a mouse, a Cherry mouse. And then obviously that is a power lead for our power adapter like that. And in here must be the computer. Can we get in there? Let's grab Mr. Scissors and get through the tape like that, and some more tape. Oh, what an exciting unboxing. And there we are. We've discovered the computer, a much smaller thing inside all this packing. And let's just put that down there and take a closer shot of it. There we are. Clearly it thinks it's an i5. It's got a sticker. I might lose those stickers. It's got in the front some sort of a USB thing. Is that a Wi-Fi thing? I don't know. There's no onboard Wi-Fi on this board, but we'll see what that does later on. But there we basically are. Good, solid thing. Very, very sturdily built. A sort of metal case on this box. And if you're wondering, it's 175 by 177 by 34 millimeters. That's about, what, 6.9 by 7 by 1.3 inches. So a very small form factor computer. So I think it's now high time to check it out in more detail. So let's delve a bit deeper into this very interesting computer. And before we open up the case, let's check out the connectivity, where on the front alongside the power button we have 3 USB 3 ports, one of which is Type C and 2 of which are Type A, and then further along we have 2 3.5mm audio jacks, the first of which is for headphone and microphone, and the second for headphone only. Around the back we then find a power connector, and next to that Gigabit Ethernet and 4 more Type A USB 3 ports. Next, on this particular unit, we have a VGA socket and 2 full-size DisplayPort connectors. And I say on this particular unit because there's lots of different configurations of this computer available. and they all have the VGA port here, they all have this DisplayPort connector, but over here, what's here varies. Some machines have a blanking plate, no connector at all, some have a serial port, a very few have an HDMI connector, and quite a few have the second DisplayPort. So do be very careful to find out what's on any unit you may purchase. It's also important to note that, as this computer and most of its friends do not have an HDMI connector, that the DisplayPort here is labelled DP++. And this means it's a dual mode DisplayPort that's able to adjust its output to work with a passive HDMI adapter. As I explained in my recent display connectors video, this means that I can use a cable like this with an HDMI plug on one end and a DisplayPort plug on the other to connect this computer to a standard HDMI display. But this only works on a DP++ socket, as ordinarily DisplayPort and HDMI output different types of signal at different voltages. Oh, and I forgot to mention that the maximum DisplayPort resolution is 4096 by 2304 at 60 frames a second. Anyway, it's now time to open up the case, and we do this by twisting what is called a thumb screw at the back here, although it's very, very tightly inserted. It won't come out certainly with a twizzling of my fingers. So I'm going to use my friend Mr. Bosch from the Bosch screwdriver set, and I've fitted the correct implement to go into the middle of this thing to give it a really good untwist. There we are, we can hopefully get it out like that. It's now a thumb screw, we can now twiddle it with our thumb, and I think the best way to get this open is to carefully turn it over like this and like this, so I can put some pressure that way. There we are. It's very exciting, isn't it, looking inside a computer? I've not looked inside this thing yet, so what are we going to see? And oh, there we are. And immediately I've spotted a slight problem, because over in the drive cage here holding the SSD, our 512GB SSD, there's only 2 of these special mounts on the SSD. There should be 2 more up here. And this is a special mount, so you can't, I'm sure, get hold of these things anymore. Obviously, they've been lost at some point. You should be able to pull that forward, I think, and yes, that would sort of move out like that. We could take it out that way. We'll take it out in a second for other purposes, but there should be 2 more mounts here. Not a problem with an SSD, more of a problem if I wanted to put in a 2.5-inch hard drive. Anyway, I'm sure that won't stop things working perfectly fine. Let's move this thing around, therefore take a look at the processor, or at least where the processor is. It is sitting under here. You can see the metal of the heatsink there. And the processor, as I said already, is a 6500T, 4 cores and 4 threads, with a 2.5 GHz base frequency boosting to 3.1. And it's also got Intel HD graphics 530, and because it's a T processor, it's got a low TDP for a standard desktop processor of 35 watts. As we can see here, there's also a cooling fan on the side, and let's just give ourselves another angle of this, because if I've done my research properly, this should come out. We should be able just to lift this out. Oh, we can, that's good, isn't it? And this comes straight out, and this, by the way, can be replaced. This is a pretty standard laptop type of fan, so you can still buy these if this happens to go wrong on a reconditioned unit. And under here, the reason I want to take it off, as you can see, is that under here we have our RAM. And this is socketed SODIMM RAM. We've got 2 4GB modules on this board. It looks like that's what I would have expected, although the board can take up to 32GB of memory, so you could put 2 16s in here if you really wanted to. Anyway, let's put the cooler back in. Let's see if it's easy to put back in as it was to take out. Looks like it should be. Oh, it is. That's a good bit of design. I very much like that. And talking about potential upgradability, not only do we have a standard 2.5-inch SATA drive, which clearly we could replace if we wanted to, but under here there are also 2 M.2 slots, one of which will accept an NVMe SSD. And as this board is PCIe 3.0, performance should be excellent. So let's take a look under here, and I need to take out the drive and the drive cage, so I'll get on with that. And oh, having removed the tiny little SATA connector, not a standard SATA connector on the board, I've discovered another fan. We've got 2 fans in this system. Didn't expect to find another fan just sitting here under the SSD, but there we are. Anyway, let's now take out the drive cage, which was my intention, using our old friend Mr. Bosch. And there we go. I'm not going to disconnect this fan connector. I'll just move that very carefully like that. Always be careful working in this type of machine. And oh, we can see a CR2032 real-time clock battery. Always good to see. I don't know if that's new or not, but we'll maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Again, it could be replaced if we wanted to. But certainly now we can see our M.2 slots. And one here will take a wireless module if we wanted to add that to the board. And the other one, this will take a NVMe SSD. So I could put in an NVMe SSD. That was my plan to fit this drive, this Western Digital black drive for testing. But as you might have noticed, there's no screw. So unless I can find a screw, I'm in trouble. I'll have to wait to do that. Let's see if I can go and find a screw. And guess what? I have found a screw. I've got it on the end of this screwdriver. It came from another computer which has very kindly donated it for a short period of time. I must find another one somewhere that this thing can keep more permanently, but there we are. That'll allow us to do some testing of this SSD. Oh, it's not completely flat. Oh, that's good enough. I think we can work with that. And it's now time, therefore, to put this all back together. There we go. And we'll now use the magic of filmmaking to put back on the case. And so I think it's now time to find out if this renewed computer actually works. Right, I've now connected everything up, so let's turn on the power. There we go, and you can probably hear the fans on the computer in the background now. And as you'll see, the machine's about to boot very quickly into Windows 10 Pro. And here in Windows, everything is running very well indeed. And I've got rid of all the normal bloatware that Microsoft includes in Windows. And if we go to Settings and System, and we go down to About, you'll see the hardware is just what we expected. Always good to be reassured we are running what we think we're going to be running. And talking of running, I have installed a little bit of software. Not least I've installed Blender, just because I've been doing some Blender tutorials on my channel fairly recently. I thought, would Blender run okay on this machine? And the answer is yes, it will. And of course, we haven't got masses of graphical processing power on this computer with the onboard Intel 530 graphics, but we have got a reasonable amount of CPU power. And therefore, it's perfectly reasonable to run Blender. It does actually handle things okay. And I wouldn't say this is the best machine to run Blender on, but you could run Blender perfectly happily on this computer. I've also installed some test software. For example, I've installed Crystal Disk Info, and I put this here because I wanted to check out the health of the 2.5-inch SSD that came with the machine, our system drive. And as you can see, Crystal Disk Info from the Smart Data tells us the health status is good. There's nothing down here flagged as anything other than good. There's no warning signs down here. The drive has run for about 4,300 hours, and it's been started up over 1,300 times, but it is reporting health is okay. This said, there's no indication here of terabytes written. And if we look across to the other SSD on this system, that's the WD Black NVMe drive I fitted for some tests, we can see it does report total host reads and writes, but we haven't got that data for the drive that came with the computer. And I thought that's a bit strange, but maybe it's an issue with Crystal Disk Info. So I also have installed here Micron Storage Executive. This is the utility provided by Micron for managing their SSDs. And if we just do that so we can see everything on the screen, and we go to Drive Details, there we go. We see that the manufacturer's software also doesn't know the bytes written to this SSD. And there is a little button there to update the firmware on the SSD, but that also doesn't work, I've discovered. So there we are. I have to assume the SSD is okay. I know it's run for about 4,000 something hours, but I don't know how much has been written to it. I just have to assume it's all right. Anyway, let's move on and do some Crystal Disk Mark tests, because I always like doing some drive speed, effectively interface speed tests. And I'm going to put this over here because I want to compare our test results here with those I recently obtained for two other mini PCs, which were the Bmax B1 Plus, which cost a bit less than this renewed HP EliteDesk, and the Odyssey X86J4125 version 2, which has much better connectivity but cost far more. So let's run the first test here, which will be, I think we'll do it on initially the system drive, the SATA SSD. Let's see how that fares. There we are, some very respectable results, which suggests that we're getting full SATA 3 performance on this system. The SATA read speed here is a bit lower, and indeed the write speed is a bit lower than we saw on the Odyssey board, but I'm sure this just reflects the fact this is an older SSD. We're clearly getting full SATA 3 performance on this computer, just as we got on the Odyssey X86, but didn't get on the Bmax B1 Plus. So let's now test the speed of the NVMe drive on this system, exactly the same drive we tested on the Odyssey board. We didn't have an NVMe interface on the Bmax B1 Plus, so let's run the tests. And there we are, good results. The NVMe interface here is clearly allowing the WD Black SSD to operate at full performance levels, which it couldn't do on the Odyssey X86J4125 version 2 board because it's got a PCIe 2.0 interface compared to PCIe 3.0 on this board. Anyway, with that proven, there's one test I want to do which all of you will expect me to do because I always do it on single board computers, and so I'll do it here on this board for old time's sake, as it were, and it is of course the test of 1080p YouTube playback. I'll just set up my standard test, and this is working absolutely fine, just as we would expect it to do on an i5 computer. We've got no drop frames. You could certainly use the HP EliteDesk 800 G2 as a media player, although do note that its fans are a little noisy. Greetings! Here I am back with a power meter connected, which records an idle energy use of around 10 watts, something like that. And at the other end of the spectrum, rendering in Blender pushes this into the 40s and sometimes the 50s, 60s, and even briefly to a maximum of 79 watts. And this is the highest figure I've recorded in any test. So the HP EliteDesk 800 is certainly not the best choice of mini PC if you want really low energy consumption. Talking of tests, we're set up here to run all the Passmark tests, so let's kick those off like this. And yes, we want to do it. Thank you very much. And as in the last section of the video, what I'm most interested in here is the comparative result compared to the other mini PCs I've tested recently on the channel. So let's use the magic of filmmaking to speed on through. And yes, we know what's about to happen. We're about to see our friends, the floating jellyfish in space. There they are, at something like 18, 19, 20 frames a second. That's not too bad. The performance of this computer compared to the other mini PCs we looked at recently is certainly much better in the 3D graphics tests. And here we are visiting a space battle for the DirectX 12 test, and here we're achieving a frame rate of around 12 frames a second. And there we are, it's finished. We have a final Passmark score. Let's just get out of this like that. And as we can see, the final score is 2356, which is not a fantastic score compared to the other computers that have been benchmarked using Passmark, but it's clearly a significantly higher result than we saw for the Odyssey X86J4125 version 2 or the Bmax B1 Plus. And so we've clearly proven if you want to get the maximum amount of processing power for your money when purchasing a low-cost mini PC, then the best thing you can do is to buy reconditioned business hardware like our EliteDesk 800 G2. Guess what? I've now installed the Linux distro Zorin OS 16.2 on the WD Black NVMe SSD. And as we can see, like Windows 10 Pro, this boots up very rapidly on this computer. Note that to perform the install, I had to press the escape key on boot to enter the BIOS and go to BIOS setup, and then go across to Advanced and Secure Boot Configuration. And this needed to be set to Legacy Support Enable and Secure Boot Disable to allow Zorin OS to install from a USB drive. Anyway, here in Zorin OS with one of its fantastic backgrounds, I thought we'd do a final performance test, and for this I'm going to launch the Kdenlive video editor, which I've installed here in sound and video and whatever it's called. There we are, it'll come up nice and rapidly I'm sure as well. It did. and we'll go to my standard test edit, which is over there, and this plays absolutely fine. We would expect it to. We haven't got a graphics card in this computer, but even so, the graphics and the processor power are easily enough to edit nicely here in Cadent Live. But the most important thing here is to go to our test, which is up in Project and Render. And I've got my script set up to render things out as I have done on so many other computers. So let's kick off a test here. We'll click on Start the Script and see how long it takes. And as usual, we'll speed on through. And there we are, a final result of 1 minute and 8 seconds, which is a little bit slower than I anticipated, but it's still better than the Bmax B1 Plus and the Odyssey X86J4125 version 2, and so the HP EliteDesk 800 G2 wins another gold. Purchasing renewed hardware like this can be a great way to obtain a powerful, low-cost, small form factor computer. The only downsides are that second-use hardware may not last as long as a new purchase, and that older hardware like this will not meet Microsoft's official requirements for installing Windows 11. And given that support for Windows 10 comes to an end in October 2025, this is going to be an increasing issue, at least for people who want to run Windows. And therefore, in a few weeks' time, I'm going to be posting a video all about installing Windows 11 on older hardware. But now that's it for another video. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, please press that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I hope to talk to you again very soon.